Welcome. My name is Katie Henches, and I'm the Director of Programs for the Child Neurology Foundation. Today's talk is part of our ongoing series on emerging issues that children and families with neurologic conditions are experiencing as a result of navigating their new normal. These sessions bring together caregivers and healthcare professionals to have a candid conversation and provide their expert advice to the child neurology community. Today, we're discussing future planning. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to hear your perspective. Could you please both introduce yourselves and your role at the ARC and share your future planning story?
Thank you, Katie. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Liz Mahar. I'm the Director of Family and Sibling Initiatives at the ARC. I've been at the ARC now for a little over 6 years. And my work at the ARC focuses on future planning. I'll be talking more about the resources later in the conversation. But I came to the ARC because I'm a sibling. I have a younger sister. Her name is Crystal. She's 34 now, and she lives at home with my mom in California, where I grew up. And, my experience as a sibling really inspired me to come to the ARC. I know when I was growing up, my parents always used to say, when you grow up, you're going to take care of Crystal. And I said, absolutely. I'm, the older sister. So I had the big sister role in me. And I said, I'm very protective of her. And my father passed away about 15 years ago. And I quickly started to realize that there were not many details in the Liz will take care of Crystal plan. And at the time, Crystal was transitioning out of public school, and she was not connected to the service system in California. So not only was I managing logistics as far as making sure my family was supported financially after my father's death, but also there was the alphabet soup of kind of learning how to support Crystal's transition into adulthood as she was transitioning out of public school. So I've been living and breathing this all my life, and I'm happy to be here today.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Lisa Pugh, and I'm Executive Director of the ARC Wisconsin. But more importantly, my main job is being mom to an adult daughter with intellectual developmental disabilities. I'll be talking a little bit about Erica today and my experience as her mom. In my professional role, I do train and support families and professionals around future planning and use my own personal experience to kind of inform a lot of that. Erica has a lifelong seizure disorder, so we're very familiar with working with the neurologists throughout her life. And she also has a pretty significant disability. She's somebody who doesn't use speech to speak. She's a nonverbal person. She uses symbols and other alternative forms of communication. She needs lots of direct personal cares to get through her day, but she's also somebody who wants to be very independent, and we've worked to promote that and support that for her. And I'll be telling more about Erica's story today. My experience with future planning, in addition to training and supporting other families, really has been personally making sure I have these things kind of written down and planned out. So even though Erica's only 21, like you heard Liz's experience, I'm always trying to support my other children, my 23-year-old daughter and even my 16-year-old son, to know kind of what the plan is. I think that's a respectful way to be planning within your family, and we do our best to do that. And we also use our future planning within our regular services planning, because I think not only is it helpful for my children and my husband and I to be on the same page about a future plan, it's also important for all of those partners and professionals in Erica's and our life to understand kind of what the end goals are. So I'll talk a little bit more about that today too. So Liz, getting us started in our conversation, I know we're going to be talking about more of those key points that families often struggle with in future planning, but some people in this call here might not know really what future planning is. So what does it entail?
So future planning is basically planning for the future of your loved one with a disability, and to make sure that throughout all stages of life, they have what they need. And it's especially important when the caregiver can no longer provide the level of support that they're providing. And, you know, future planning, a lot of people that I've met, both professionals and caregivers, have said, I've never heard the term. I mean, for professionals, you know, if you're doing any type of service planning, that is future planning. And for caregivers, you're already thinking about future planning, but you might be thinking about the big ones like housing and financial planning. But just as a whole, future planning is planning for your loved one. And, you know, it's the first step is, you know, talking to the person and seeing what their wishes are for the future, not just you as the caregiver, or, you know, if there's other siblings or important people in the person's life. Like Lisa, you mentioned, you make sure that Erica's supporters and professional caregivers are also on the same page. That's very important. I like to call it the future planning team. So it's making sure that there's a future planning team there to support the person. And then there's the housing piece, you know. I know that in the last couple years, Crystal lives at home with my mom, and we've been thinking about the brick and mortar of what's going to happen with Crystal. Where is she going to live afterwards? And, you know, when we ask her, sometimes she wants to live closer to me and my husband, Brian, out here in Virginia. And other days she'll say, I want to live in LA afterwards. So, you know, it depends what day of the week, but also, you know, we've been looking at some supported living and group homes the last couple years, doing tours of them. And we've also quickly realized that it's not just the home and how you're going to pay for it, but what supports the person need in the home. But also, what does the person need in their community? It's really important for Crystal to be near her job. She works part-time at a senior center. So it's really important that her job coach is able to drive her, and where she ends up living is not too far from her job. So that's another big piece about housing, is not just where does the person live, but what's important to the person, what do they need in the home, and what do they need around them. Another piece is financial planning, which I know it's everyone's top of mind. And it's you know, making sure that you are aware of what public benefits are available to the person. Also, when your child or the person that you support transitions into adulthood, it's making sure that they are eligible for benefits and to reapply, because now they're going to be reapplying as an adult. Another important piece is the savings. So people might be saving away, but there are ways for a person with a disability to save through ABLE accounts or special needs trusts, that they're able to save some private financial resources without jeopardizing any of those public benefits that they may be receiving or that they may be eligible for. And then another piece of it is supporting the person's decision making. So, you know, you might hear guardianship, where that might be, you know, the best option for some people. For some families, it's really a unique decision and case by case, but it's really important to think through the other options, such as powers of attorney and other supportive decision making, which Lisa will talk about a little bit more later in the conversation. So just making sure that you are also supporting the person in their day-to-day decision making. And then employment and daily activities. So if your loved one is in school right now, making sure that you're asking them, what do you want to do when you grow up? And making sure that you're incorporating those skills in the IEP so you can end up with, you know, sort of that end goal, and making sure their skills are being developed to what they want to do in the future. Where if they're currently working like Crystal is, making sure she's happy with her job, and see if she wants to you know, move on to maybe another role at the senior center. And then finally, social connections. I know when we get older as adults, it's hard to find friends, but for people with disabilities, it may be a little bit harder, making sure that the person's circle of support is not just, you know, family and the professional caregivers, but also other people in their lives. So neighbors, cousins, lifelong friends, making sure that their social connections is outside of not, you know, the family home and the professional caregivers. So it's really a blueprint of the person's life, and it's an ongoing process. And it's making sure you write down. You're not going to have the answers to all the questions. I know I'm very type A, and when we started doing future planning for my sister, I thought, okay, one and done, we're going to do this. And we don't have to think about this until maybe my mom is no longer able to support her, but really it's an ongoing process. And making sure you include also the history of the person's education, their medical history, health history, and also what's important to them, what makes them happy on the day-to-day basis. So, Lisa, I know I mentioned it's important, especially when the caregiver can no longer provide support, but Erica's 21, and I know there was a point in Erica's life when she was younger and you were very focused on, school and driving her to medical appointments and doctor's appointments. There's a lot of logistics that's involved in that. Why should parents or caregivers be thinking about future planning before the child turns 18?
Oh, totally. I mean, being a parent to a young child with disabilities or special health care needs, it really can be exhausting, right? Because you are juggling all those things. But I think, keeping your eye on the prize of the future is super important, and incorporating other people in that conversation, as Liz has been saying. I think a lot of the biggest misconceptions that Liz brought up is a lot of times parents of young children think, well, I've got a will, or I have a special needs trust, that's my future plan. Well, that's an important part of it, but it's certainly not the whole thing, as what Liz was saying. And so some of the things, my husband and I have tried to always prioritize really honest conversations with our son and daughter, and with other family members, including grandma and grandpa, who might want to, be giving Erica some money someday, but also to kind of let them know what supports we've put in place, or what supports we're building for and with Erica, so that they don't feel all on their own. Like, well, mom and dad gave me the plan, but I executed on when mom and dad are no longer here. It's really kind of this living, breathing thing that we're trying to put to life over time, and then continually revisit for the sake of everybody, but especially for Erica. So I'd say, for Erica, as she has just transitioned to adult life, our eye is on the prize of some sort of, community supported living place where she can go. Obviously she's not going to be able to live with us forever. And frankly, I don't think she wants to. So what is that plan, and how, and not just the where, but how can we help her build those skills, which I think also takes some planning for her to, we're teaching her a little bit by bit how to put soap in the washing machine and take some responsibility. I think that's something even parents of young children can do, is build some chores and responsibility into their daily life, so that the child is learning some of those skills over time. I think sometimes we do a lot of helping as mom and dad. It's more convenient to do it that way, but it's so important as our kids grow up to kind of be building those skills. So I'm always trying to think about ways to help Erica kind of build those independent skills, and to make sure other people are on board with that as we're looking toward the Erica moving out someday plan. But then also, like you said, for your sister, trying to build, employment skills for her. She has a volunteer experience, and that's helping her make relationships and friendships with people in the community that are important in her network. The employment, the money she's earning, she's able to put that in her ABLE account. If you haven't heard of an ABLE account, you should learn about them. We're not going to talk about them in great detail, but an ABLE account is a really excellent savings tool for families of people with disabilities, and it can help build some of that financial independence piece that is often overlooked for people with disabilities. So Erica has an ABLE account. She puts a lot of her work earnings in there, and she actually is thinking about right now using some of that money to purchase a small business where she'll be doing some aluminum can crushing and having contracts with different communities. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, we're really, and again, Luke, my son, and McKenna, my other daughter, are on board and understanding, and they're excited about this, and it's all kind of building into that big future plan picture. And one of the reasons why I think this is so important is I think the COVID-19 pandemic has taught all of us really how essential future planning is. I know I've certainly seen people get sick, and have read many stories of family members dying without having a future plan in place. And these aren't, 80 and 90-year-old people. I mean, a big change in our lives can happen at any time. And without that plan on paper, really people spiral into crisis. And I think that's unfair to the siblings who are often, left kind of to implement a plan that isn't really a plan. So I think that COVID-19 pandemic really has kind of made future planning even more important than it was before. So, I mean, I know, Liz, I spoke a little bit about, kind of the challenges we've faced, and you certainly have mentioned that. And I know that you've had some struggles in planning with Crystal that you mentioned, but what are the common challenges and things that families should be considering?
Yeah, so I know the number one challenge is that the caregiver is facing their mortality. There's, a lot of emotions around it. I wish my mom could be listening into this. I wish we could create a Spanish version for her. But, I think everyone has their emotions in this. The parents, other family members, siblings. And it's important that the emotions don't stop the plan. So it's really important that with that, for people to have some type of like mentorship or peer support. I know I have a lot of friends that are siblings. One of my best friends from home growing up, her brother has cerebral palsy. And, we were always there for each other. And I have some friends out here in the DC area that not only that I work with at the ARC, but in the area that have siblings. And one of our friends started a sibling support group. And it's really great to talk to siblings my age. It's just good to vent, connect to resources, but also at conferences, I often also meet younger siblings that, talk about, what should I be thinking about? Or they have the common questions that I had, either in high school or in college. And it's good that I can talk to them because then they feel like they have someone that's walked the path that they're about to walk on. So it's really important for parents just to think about that. There's some sibling support groups out there for my child that doesn't have, or children that don't have the disability. And I know SIB shops are also popular, and we can include those resources after our conversation today. But also for the parents, it's also important to make sure to connect with other peers, because then you all feel like you're climbing that ladder together. And also, another common challenge is access to the services and a distrust of the service system. So people, every state has a different service system and wait lists, and there's always some roadblock, it feels like. I mean, that's the way I feel, to this day still. There's going to be always a roadblock. Right now for us, it's COVID-19. Crystal's at home. And I think with that, there's other parts of the plan that can be done. Like, I said before, it's not just one and done, it's ongoing. And for example, right now we're making sure that Crystal's really aware of the technology outside of FaceTime and texting, and trying to introduce Zoom and other virtual platforms for her to be comfortable with. So that's just an example of, if you might have to wait for a waiver, or you might have to wait for, whatever service you're waiting for, look to other pieces, or start, seek out peer support, and maybe other peers can also be helpful in overcoming any challenges that you're facing in that way. And then it's lack of access to information, or just information that's easy to understand. I mentioned, like, when my dad passed away, there was not really much in the detail, and it felt like I had to learn a whole new language. And there's even the term future planning, that's like, it's kind of jargon. People don't really know that term. Mm-hmm. And so I think just getting connected to people out there, if you're connected, just watching this Zoom recording, I think is a good first step. So it's just important to get connected to resources there and talk to people, because I think even talking to people, you're able to then get more information and start to slowly get information and build that knowledge.
Are there some core resources that you would point people to on future planning? Where do they look?
So a great first step would be to go to the ARC Center for Future Planning. So futureplanning.thearc.org. And that's the program that I've been working on over the last 6 years. And it's just a really great way to figure out what's involved in future planning. We have videos, we have plain language resources for self-advocates, people with disabilities. Videos, I know that people learn in different ways and they prefer to consume their information in different ways. So we have about 10 videos in a video gallery where people with disabilities tell their story about how they were able to plan. We also have other resources on there, and we have a build your plan tool where people are able to go in and create an account for free and start to plan. So the ARC's future planning resources are a good first start because it'll provide that sort of broad framework of what to consider. And then I would also definitely encourage people, if you're not connected with a chapter, state or local chapter of the ARC, to definitely connect. We have a resource directory on the Center for Future Planning website where you can also be connected not just to a local or state chapter. If there's one that's not nearby, then consider looking into protection advocacy agencies. And our resource directory is also a good first step to those state and local resources. And, I like to say that once I started chipping away at what's involved in future planning and what's available to Crystal, to this day, we still think about, okay, what's out there for her that would be like a supported living situation. So it's a lot of knowledge gathering. And I will say the ARC Center for Future Planning resources online, it's kind of like bite-sized information. So if you're not ready to take it all in, if you're interested in one topic area, I keep mentioning housing because that's sort of top of mind right now for our family. And start with the topic that you're really sort of top of mind and you really want to dig into first. But I think that at the end of the day, knowledge just helps families advocate for their loved ones. And Lisa, you talked a little bit about this already. With Erica, you're building those self-advocacy skills. Mm-hmm. For other parents and caregivers out there, what are some tips that you have to better prepare their child with a disability to be a better self-advocate now and throughout life?
Yeah, I think one of the important elements of future planning that people sometimes forget is that the person really should be part of it themselves, no matter what the age of the person with the disability, to build their skills to participate in their own future planning and be clear about speaking up what do they want their future to look like. So we try to do that with Erica. As I mentioned, we're trying to give her responsibilities and to help her feel more independent and to honor her choices. And that when she was younger, obviously that was simple ways like allowing her to choose what she was going to wear. And now to give her choices, and we use like symbols and laminated pictures, and she's used a communication device before, and she uses lots of modified sign language. But we are always trying to build in choices for her so she feels empowered. I'd say another tip is that we really try to incorporate our future planning into our service planning conversations, whether they be with healthcare providers or vocational services providers, or with her care managing team, so that everybody kind of understands, yeah, we want Erica to maybe move out someday. And that's actually how the laundry practicing came into play, as some of her support people said, yeah, we can help her to practice doing the laundry. Every time we come home, we'll have her put a load of laundry in. So I think when there's more people on the team, then it makes it, you're going to make more progress, and everybody kind of can get excited about that. That's also how she got like hooked into a volunteer experience, because we mentioned we really wanted her to connect with other people. And now we go to the grocery store and there's all sorts of people that say hi to Erica that I have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
But I think that's great. I think
going back to the social connection, she has a social life outside of her family.
Absolutely. And I think even parents of young children, like you can make sure that that child is with you in the planning meeting. Sometimes IEP meetings, other meetings, they forget, they think, well, we're talking to the parent. How can the child participate? You know, you can find ways for the child to participate no matter what age they are. And I think it's important, you know, people in the disability world say nothing about us without us. I think we as parents and family members should really remember to honor that for our loved ones with disabilities, and that certainly comes with future planning. So
yeah, I think I think a lot about, you know, in the medical setting particularly, you know, with supported decision making. I know that you had some challenges with, you know, educating some of her Erica's healthcare providers around the supported decision-making agreement that you have with her. So could you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, absolutely. I think we in Wisconsin are a little bit of pioneers in that. Erica is 21. She has a pretty significant disability and we don't have guardianship. So that's really kind of pushing the envelope of what is typically expected. I know in this state, and I think this is true wherever you might live, that often teachers might start talking to you about guardianship at age 18, or doctors sometimes start talking about guardianship. You're going to need to get guardianship because that's kind of what has already been done. Like we've been doing that for years, that when children with developmental disabilities turn the age of majority, 18, you should get guardianship, mom, you should get guardianship, dad. And the thinking on that is really starting to change, and it's one of the reasons why we have a supported decision-making agreement for Erica here in Wisconsin. Now it's a law, so there is such a thing as a supported decision-making agreement in Wisconsin, but there's no reason, if whatever state you're living in, that you can't still use supported decision-making, and there is no cliff at age 18 if you don't get guardianship. No matter what anybody tells you, the sky is not going to fall. And I think supported decision making really helps you to continue to practice, support that young adult, because who at 18 is fully prepared to make all really great adult decisions?
Yeah. I definitely wasn't.
No, I think that's true of most 18 to 21-year-olds, okay?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think just like we have to mature in that decision making, and that's true for people with IDD as well. And supported decision making doesn't take all of those fundamental rights away and gives people the room to grow. And so that's what we're kind of working on with Erica as she's becoming an adult. But in terms of our experience with supported decision making in the medical arena, because the medical providers are very, when the child turns 18, they want all the forms and the boxes checked, and often that means who's the guardian, who's going to sign the form. Now, Erica doesn't sign her name, she uses a stamp, and that often throws people off. And so here's my story, is that we were set for a once-a-year neurology appointment after Erica turned 18, and I get a call from a nurse the day before the appointment saying, I see that you're not the guardian, and it looks like this form was signed with a stamp. I don't think we can accept that. Are you in the process of getting guardianship? And for anybody who's has a once-a-year neurology type check-in, you know those appointments are not easy to get and keep. And so she was saying, we're going to have to reschedule this appointment until you can get guardianship. And I said, well, we're using supported decision-making, and the person with the hospital didn't know what that was. And so I think, you know, you're going to have to be in a position of educating medical providers about the concept of supported decision-making, but it's a really important thing to educate yourself on as a family member as well, and if you're a medical professional, because a lot of the research coming out says, you know, self-determination, greater self-determination keeps people healthier and safer when they can speak up for themselves. And the more that we're helping to promote that, the better. And so that's why I believe firmly in supported decision-making. And we ultimately got the appointment. It kind of threw the hospital for a loop. But I think we're going to continue to run into situations like that where we'll have to be pioneers. But I think it's a really important thing for families to consider in their future planning.
And Lisa, you bring up a good point, because a lot of times as caregivers and family members, we are in the position to educate people around us, whether it be the teachers or doctors or people that we encounter who are not quite there yet as far as having that information. So hopefully, you know, discussions like this and resources like the ARC Center for Future Planning website can provide some of the information that caregivers need to arm themselves with the knowledge so they can support their loved one, but also that their loved one can eventually be better self-advocates for themselves.
I agree.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Your expertise is awesome, and we so appreciate that you are willing to share it with the child neurology community. For those of you watching, looking for more resources, the original Child Neurology Foundation programming is available to help navigate care for children and families during this new normal. Check out our CNF Resource Center at www.childneurologyfoundation.org/COVID-19. Together we will get through this, and together we are all child neurology.